Episode 8 Boba dials up the intensity as we near the end of Season 1. It challenges everything we've learned, and like many episodes prior, takes us to the brink of real answers, only to leave us in the dark for another week. Let's get started. The episode begins with the arrival of Julian. Did you know that 5 of the 8 episodes have opened on the exterior of the house, typically with the approach of a vehicle? We've also seen a focus on characters crossing the threshold of the front entrance, as if the door acts as a barrier between the outside world and the bizarre, potentially evil atmosphere that lies within the Turner's home. Back to Julian. We see the first of several flashbacks that occur throughout this episode. He approaches the Turner's house in the pouring rain, pounds on the front door, but gets no answer. He goes to the back door, but again gets no answer. However, he peers into the kitchen and we see something on the table, though it's hard to tell what it is. It could be old meat of some sort, or maybe even a brown sack. It looks like a champagne bottle is sticking out of the top. We eventually see it from 2 angles, which doesn't help much. If you look closely, you can see flies on it, which hint that whatever it is, it's rotting. In present day, Sean and Dorothy are preparing to attend the annual Television Journalism Awards. Leanne and Toby are also heading out, going on what Sean describes as a date, although Toby states it's not really a date. With everyone out for the evening, Julian steps in to babysit Jericho, who's already down for the night. Once everyone has left the house, Julian quickly calls Roscoe, who he wants to tail Leanne on her date to see if she attempts to make contact with Uncle George. After the call to Roscoe, Julian briefly watches News 8 on the TV, which is the network Dorothy's with. The anchor reporting is not Dorothy, but instead a blonde woman, who I'm guessing is the intern that's been mentioned a few times this season. Dorothy spoke poorly of her early on, saying she lacked talent, and was only moving up thanks to performing sexual favors. Is this true? Probably not. We've seen that Dorothy has a ferocious ego and struggles to admit that anyone besides herself has talent. This new anchor, paired with the fact that Dorothy was only invited to the awards and sat at a guest table, leads to the idea that her time in the spotlight is fading. Julian doesn't hear anything on the baby monitor and decides he ought to check on Jericho. At first, he stands outside the nursery door, comically asking aloud if the baby is awake. Did he expect an answer? I'm not sure why he didn't just walk in right away. Things soon spiral out of control when he goes to the crib and finds that the doll is back. He frantically searches the house but can't find the baby. A call to Roscoe reveals that Leanne is in fact at the bowling alley without the baby, and a call to Sean is interrupted by Dorothy before Julian can explain what's going on in the house. Things take another turn when Frank Pierce, Dorothy and Julian's father, arrives unexpectedly. He tells Julian that Dorothy had texted him in regards to Jericho's baptism. Frank, still under the impression that they're keeping up the whole doll charade, is mortified by the embarrassing thought of baptizing a doll in front of the church. The two soon head to the cellar for, of course, more wine. Watching these two together, we can see that Julian's personality has been shaped in some degree by his father's. They have a similar style and speak in a similar manner. Frank makes an interesting comment that the house should be sold, saying it has too many ghosts, gesturing around the cellar as he says this. If we needed any more clues that the basement/cellar played host to something terrible, here's yet another to add to the pile. Frank soon launches into a pitch on a scheme to get rid of the doll. He shows Julian a picture of a baby that looks nearly identical to Jericho. However, we learn it's actually a baby a Swedish woman is willing to sell. Some black market baby buying? Yikes. Frank wants to switch the doll with his child Anders, unaware that this scenario has already played out in an even more bizarre circumstance than the one he suggested. Frank leaves for the night and Leanne and Toby return from their date. After that long, uncomfortable end of the first date linger, Leanne makes a move. She goes for the goodnight kiss, only to be denied. I felt for her here. She thought they had a real date, but Toby clearly did not. Was Julian behind this date idea, hoping for Roscoe to catch Leanne in a rendezvous with Uncle George? Leanne walks in and sees the doll on the floor of the hallway. With no hesitation, she picks it up and proceeds to treat it like it's real. On the way up the stairs, she's blocked by Julian, who's no longer amused and wants to know where the real baby is. Leanne's unyielding commitment to treating the doll as real edges Julian toward a descent into madness. His belief that this was all about blackmail, that Leanne and her uncle are just looking for a big payday, has proven not to have any merit. Leanne only seems to want the truth about what happened to Jericho, and Julian desperately wants to avoid reliving that moment, at one point offering her up to $100,000 to end all of this. Eventually, Julian reaches his breaking point. When he let go of the doll, where did the cry come from? Has Julian finally cracked enough to just imagine the sound? I have to say, Rupert Grint banging on that pot while walking around yelling, "Baby, wake up, little baby," is easily my favorite thing so far in the new year. In a flashback, we see Julian go into the nursery. We see the window has been left open and the mobile is spinning wildly. Unfortunately, I'm not sure we learned a whole lot with this flashback. In present day, Julian gathers himself after the pot-banging fiasco. He goes to Leanne, who's praying at her bedside, and tells her the truth of what happened. We don't hear any of this, but Julian later admits to Sean that he told her. The Turners return home, and the real Jericho appears to be back. Okay, so what the hell was with the doll? We see Sean walk upstairs from the cellar and close a side door that's been left open. Then, in the next scene, Toby is walking down the street. He passes by Wanda, who he recognizes, and calls out to her. She turns, and we see she's holding a baby carrier. She's too far away to see in detail, but it looks like there's a child in the carrier. So we're left to wonder, did Wanda help switch out the baby for the doll while Julian was babysitting? If so, why? Also, who's responsible for orchestrating this plan? The only answer that makes sense is Leanne, who could have used the doll as a way to push Julian over the edge and get him to tell her the truth. I'm torn on this, though. There's a lot of moving parts in that scheme, and so much that could have gone wrong. When exactly did they pull off the switch? Is Leanne truly crafty enough to plan a scheme to that level and pull it off perfectly? Last thing we'll talk about is Leanne and Dorothy. In our previous video, we discussed how there's been an evidence shift indicating that Dorothy could be the one responsible for Jericho's death. The final scene is even more evidence for that. Leanne now knows the truth, and we see that she no longer has the same warmth towards Dorothy. She even calls her Mrs. Turner when they're talking, indicating she no longer sees Dorothy as a friend. This was my favorite episode of the season. A psychological thrill ride that had me on the edge of my seat and made me question my own beliefs about what's really going on. I truly have no idea what to expect with this show anymore, and am very eager to see what the final 2 episodes have in store. Rupert Grint delivered an incredible performance, easily his best of the season. His depiction of an emotionally tortured man, finally pushed over the edge, was absolutely thrilling to watch. I'll give this episode an A. It's hard to cover everything in these videos, so leave us a comment and let us know if we missed any important details. What was the significance of the pearls, and why did Leanne put one in her mouth? Let us know below. If you've enjoyed this video, we'd love you to subscribe to see more content like this. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.